Westminster, midwinter, 1511. The air inside the palace is thick, a cloying mixture of burnt incense and the sour smell of vinegar-soaked rags. For 52 days, England has been delirious with a frantic, desperate joy. King Henry VIII has been firing cannons, distributing gold into the gutters of London, and feasting until his eyes grew bloodshot. He finally had what his father died praying for, a living male heir. Henry, Duke of Cornwall, the Prince of Wales, the future. But tonight, the music has stopped. The heavy velvet curtains of the nursery are drawn tight against the draught, and the only sound is the rhythmic, shallow wheezing of a child who is barely 2 months old. In our history, the silence comes just before dawn. The New Year's boy slips away, his lungs surrendering to the London chill. The grief that follows is more than a personal tragedy, it is a tectonic shift. That silence is the first crack in the foundation of the medieval world. It is the silence that begins Henry's descent into a frantic obsession with his legacy, his great matter, and the eventual, violent schism with the Catholic Church. Our modern world was built on the wreckage of that infant's cradle. We are the children of that empty nursery. But here, the divergence is not a thunderclap, it is a whisper. The fever, which in our world claimed him, suddenly breaks. The prince's skin cools. His eyes open, focusing on the flickering candlelight. The little prince breathes, and with that breath, the trajectory of Western civilization is diverted. The king's relief is monumental, but it is also a closed door. In our world, this boy's death triggered the Reformation, the execution of 2 queens, and the eventual rise of the Virgin Queen, Elizabeth. It forced England to stand alone, to look toward the sea, and to reinvent itself as a defiant, Protestant island. But in this world, the Tudor rose remains grafted to the Spanish crown. The alliance with the Habsburgs is not a temporary political marriage, it is a permanent blood bond. Rome does not fall in England. The monasteries remain standing, their bells tolling for a Latin mass that will never be silenced. And the woman we know as Bloody Mary? In this timeline, she is never the traumatized daughter of a discarded wife, forced to watch her mother rot in exile. She becomes the most beloved princess in Europe, the jewel of a stable, Catholic, and deeply conservative court. England is spared the fire of the 16th century. It is spared the scaffolds of Smithfield and the looming threat of the Spanish Armada. But as we watch this healthy boy grow in his cradle, we have to wonder, was this a mercy or just another cruelty? Did England gain peace, or did it lose its soul before it ever had the chance to find it? In this timeline, the 1520s do not belong to the mistresses and the radicals. They belong to the scholars. The figure who dominates our history, and Bullen, the night crow, whom many blame for the fracture of the English soul, becomes a footnote, without the king's desperate need for an annulment, and remains just another clever lady-in-waiting. Perhaps she marries a minor nobleman, lives a quiet life in the countryside, and dies with her head still firmly on her shoulders. The great matter never exists, and because of that, the machinery of the English Reformation is never built. Instead, we see the rise of Henry IX. Imagine this boy, raised not under the shadow of his father's growing madness, but under the brilliant, steady hand of Catherine of Aragon. She is a daughter of the Renaissance, a woman who studied under the finest tutors in Spain. Under her tutelage, the young prince becomes a philosopher king, a humanist who speaks 6 languages and views his crown as a divine, sacred duty to the papacy. In our world, Henry VIII is remembered as the man who tore down the monasteries, leaving the English countryside littered with the hollowed-out skeletons of abbeys. But in this world, he remains what the Pope first called him, the fidei defensor, the defender of the faith. The monasteries do not burn, they flourish. They remain the hospitals, the libraries, and the social safety nets of the kingdom. And what of the men who built the modern English state? Thomas Cromwell, the blacksmith's son who engineered the break with Rome, likely never rises beyond the status of a talented lawyer for the church. He is a man of immense ambition with nowhere to point it. Without the king's need to dismantle the law to marry a new woman, the radical thinkers and the iconoclasts are kept in the shadows. There is no meritocracy of the ruthless. What we see instead is a map of a unified Catholic Europe. England and the Holy Roman Empire, under the sprawling Habsburg dynasty, become essentially one giant family business. London and Madrid are two halves of a single heart. Trade flows, the Inquisition provides stability, and the English Channel is no longer a moat of defiance, but a bridge to a continent that is unified, orthodox, and stagnant. It is a world of breathtaking architectural beauty and religious certainty. But as the cathedrals grow taller and the Latin chants grow louder, we must ask, was this security worth the price of the English mind? By choosing the safety of the Mother Church, did England trade its future for a comfortable, gilded cage? In this world, the Atlantic Ocean is not a battlefield, it is a Spanish lake. In our history, England's drive to colonize North America was fueled by a fierce, Protestant desire to check the power of the Popish Spanish Empire. Men like Walter Raleigh and Francis Drake were not just explorers, they were holy warriors and privateers, driven by the knowledge that if England did not claim the New World, the Inquisition would. But in this timeline, that friction vanishes. With a Tudor king who is a nephew by marriage to the Holy Roman Emperor, England does not compete with Spain, it partners with them. The Treaty of Tordesillas, which divided the world between Spain and Portugal, is respected by London. The English navy, rather than being the sea dogs who harassed Spanish galleons, becomes the auxiliary fleet for the Habsburgs. Consider the map of North America. The 13 colonies are never settled by Puritan refugees seeking a new Jerusalem, because the Puritans in England are either suppressed or never exist at all. There is no Roanoke, no Jamestown, no Plymouth Rock. Instead, the English and Spanish move north together. Imagine a world where the East Coast is a tapestry of Catholic missions and Anglo-Spanish trading posts. New York is never named for a Stuart Duke, perhaps it is Nuevo Madrid, a sprawling colonial capital where the dominant language is a hybrid of English and Spanish, and the dominant law is the Council of the Indies. This brings us to the cruelty check that historians often debate. In our world, Mary Tudor is remembered as a tragic, bitter figure, the Bloody Mary, who burned heretics in a desperate attempt to undo her father's sins. She was a woman defined by her trauma, declared a bastard, separated from her mother, and humiliated by her father's court. But in this world, that trauma never happens. Mary is the cherished daughter of a secure king. She is never stripped of her titles. She never watches her mother rot in the damp halls of Kimbolton Castle. She is married off in a glittering ceremony to a French dauphin or a German prince, living a life of immense luxury, intellectual fulfillment, and profound piety. She is Mary the Merciful, a patron of the arts and a symbol of European unity. It is a beautiful picture, but here is the hidden cost. By saving Mary from her bitterness, we lose the iron-willed queen who taught England that a woman could rule alone. And by avoiding the rivalry with Spain, England loses the spark of competition that forced it to become a global maritime power. The English did not become masters of the sea because they were destined to, they did it because they were desperate. In this timeline, that desperation is replaced by a comfortable, stagnant peace. England is wealthy, England is stable, and England is safe. But it is no longer England. It is merely the northernmost province of a monolithic Catholic world order. Peace is often a mask for paralysis. In our history, the English Reformation was a violent, chaotic break, but it forced the nation to define itself. It created the island mentality, the sense of being a people apart, defiant and self-reliant. In this timeline, that identity is never born. By remaining within the fold of the Mother Church and the Habsburg alliance, England accepts a price of victory that is quietly devastating. It becomes a gilded puppet state. The Tudor kings may wear the crown, but the strings are pulled from Madrid and Vienna. London is no longer the heart of a rising empire. It is a satellite office for a continental superpower. The most chilling manifestation of this grip is the arrival of the advisors. To ensure that the young Henry IX remains secure on his throne, the Spanish king, his cousin, sends a contingency of specialists to London. They don't arrive as an invading army, but as a security measure to protect the king from the Lutheran plague seeping in from the German states. The Inquisition comes to England not with a shout, but with a whisper. There are no grand bonfires at Smithfield at first, just a slow, methodical tightening of the law. Censorship becomes a tool of statecraft. The vibrant, chaotic printing presses of London, which in our world gave us the works of Shakespeare and the King James Bible, are brought under the strict control of the Index Libro Rum Prohibitorum. In this world, the English language is relegated to the tongue of the commoners and the fields, while Latin remains the mandatory language of law, God, and the elite. But where there is total control, there is always a secret fire. The resistance in this timeline is not led by disgruntled dukes or rival claimants to the throne. It is led by the men of the word. Imagine a young scholar named William Tyndale. In our history, he was a martyr who gave us the first English translation of the New Testament. In this timeline, he is a ghost in the shadows of the London docks, a man hunted not by a temperamental Henry VIII, but by a professional, international secret police. His crime is the most dangerous one imaginable in a unified Catholic Europe. He wants to put the Bible into the hands of the baker and the blacksmith in their own language. These rebels are not fighting for a crown. They are fighting for the right to think in English. They are an underground network of scholars and merchants who realize that while the streets are safe and the cathedrals are beautiful, the English mind is being suffocated. The tragedy of the Habsburg trap is that it feels like stability. There are no civil wars, no time of troubles, and no fear of invasion. But as the decades pass, England begins to forget who it was before it became a province of the empire. Was this safety a mercy, or was it the slow, methodical erasure of a nation's soul? In the quiet, orderly halls of this alternate Westminster, there is a ghost who haunts the corridors, not because she died, but because she was never permitted to exist. Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, the Gloriana of our history. In this timeline, Anne Boleyn was never more than a passing shadow in the king's court, and so the flame-haired daughter who defined an era is never conceived. With her absence, the golden age of England is strangled in the crib. There is no royal navy to defeat an armada that never sails. There is no Sir Francis Drake, because there is no need for state-sponsored piracy against a Spanish ally. Even the language begins to wither. In our world, the Elizabethan era was a linguistic explosion, a time of Shakespeare, Marlowe, and the soaring rhythmic prose of a newly independent English church. But in a world where the Church of Rome remains the sole arbiter of truth, and Latin remains the language of the intellect, that creative fire is dampened. The theater is seen not as a glorious mirror of the human condition, but as a potential breeding ground for heresy, strictly monitored by the advisors from Madrid. The plays that would have redefined the Western mind are never written. The poets who would have challenged the stars are silenced before they can find their voice. We are left with a final, unsettling comparison. In our history, we often mourn the little prince, Henry, who died in the winter of 1511. We see it as a moment of profound cruelty, the beginning of a king's madness and a queen's heartbreak. But we must face the tragic irony. His death was the painful birth of the English spirit. It was the trauma of the 1530s that forced England to look inward, to find its own voice, and to eventually look outward to the horizon. Without the tragedy of Catherine of Aragon, there is no triumph of Elizabeth. Without the great matter, there is no Great Britain. If the boy in the cradle survives, England remains a comfortable, pious, and utterly unremarkable province of a Spanish-dominated Europe. The world we know, the world of individual liberty, maritime empire, and the English tongue, simply vanishes into the incense-heavy air of a Catholic Renaissance. So, We return to the cradle in 1511. Was the survival of the prince a mercy, or was it the ultimate theft? For years, the story of the Tudors has been framed by the suffering of its women, and many of you have rightly argued that the treatment of Mary Tudor was the darkest stain on the dynasty's soul. But now we must weigh the scales. Does a happy, honored Mary justify a lost golden age? Does the stability of a unified church outweigh the intellectual fire of a Reformation? History is rarely a choice between good and evil. It is usually a choice between two different kinds of pain. I suspect many of you will disagree on which price was higher to pay. Let me know in the comments. Would you trade the world we have for the peace that was lost?